I'm having fun. That's super important, right? Like, because otherwise you burn out, you run out of energy. Like, you need to figure out how to make it fun.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gumroad Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Michaelay, a senior writer at Gumroad, where I deconstruct the tactics, strategies, and processes of top creators. Each week on the podcast, I interview creators and digital entrepreneurs who are at the top of their field. In this week's episode, I interviewed Sahil Lavingia, Gumroad founder and CEO. Sahil and I talked about the equity crowdfunding round earlier this year, how we work at Gumroad, and what to expect in the product in Q3 and Q4 of this year. This was a great conversation, and one of more we'll have with Sahil in the future. Enjoy. Our guest today is the Gumroad founder and CEO, Sahil Lavingia. Sahil, thank you for being here.
You're very, very welcome.
Awesome. Well, let's dive right in. Gumroad earlier this year raised an equity crowdfunding round, which was great, super successful. But after that, you've been hard at it, hiring and scaling the team, scaling the product and developing the product. So I just wanted to start there. It's a company of creators, for creators, and we want to turn creators into owners. Tell me how you've reacted and responded after the race.
Yeah. I mean, it started out because we wanted to bring creators into the fold. I think equity ownership in businesses is just like a really, really important idea. Like, I think it's sort of one of the many solutions to sort of a lot of this sort of macro, I think, issues that often get talked about. But I think this as a solution doesn't really have traction yet. It's still super early. Very few companies do it for a variety of reasons. So I really wanted Gumroad to sort of make the case, right? For like, this is a good thing to do for the 7,000 people who are now investors in the company, many creators. But it's also a great thing for Gumroad because it means that we have all of these new evangelists. Every time I do a hiring call, I just email the Gumroad. I don't even tweet about it because we have too much demand at this point. So I email the Republic investors and I say, hey, these are the 3 roles we're looking to fill. And guess what? These people are all effectively spokespeople for the company, right? They invest in the company. Presumably they did some research. They're not just normal sort of, hey, you should go work at the startup. They sort of understand Gumroad like pretty deeply. They can communicate its value. So I think it's been amazing in terms of sort of the recruiting function, which, if you talk to most founders and CEOs, think they struggle with the most is hiring, right? Like the bottleneck to product development is people, and people, it's kind of hard to scale. Twitter and these things, I think help tremendously with that. And, the goal wasn't to raise, one reason not to raise venture is because we're not necessarily looking to sort of grow at all costs. Like, we certainly want to grow. Like, I want to give our investors like a great return, et cetera, et cetera. But like I think Daniel Vasala, who works on the team, had a really interesting statement, which he was like, I'm kind of treating this like a Kickstarter, but with some like bonus equity, right? Where it's like you want something to happen, like you want to see like, what is Gumroad going to do with this? That may lead to Gumroad becoming like a better investment over time. I think TBD, right? Like, my goal now is to basically hire a bunch of people. I think when we did the crowdfunding, we were maybe 15, 20. Now we're like 35 people, including everyone trialing with us. Goal is to be around 40, 50 by the end of the year. You can sort of see the pace of product development start to accelerate. Internally, you're definitely seeing that. Creators, I think, are starting to get a sense of that, but there's going to be a lot more pretty awesome stuff coming. And then, the big question mark is like, does this mean that the company is more valuable over time, right? I wrote an essay 2 years ago reflecting on my failure to build $1 billion company, which said something along the lines of, it doesn't matter how awesome your product is or how amazing your team is. The rate of the market sort of determines most of your growth, right? This is kind of an important lesson, I think, for creators too. Like, often the market that you pick is sort of more important than maybe your like ability as a creator sometimes even. So that's kind of the big question mark, is we're going to do a bunch of stuff. We have like an insane amount of stuff that you can check out our roadmap, roadmap.gumroad.com. We have a bunch more stuff internal that we're really excited about. But we'll see. We'll see if Gumroad sort of continues to grow at an accelerating rate.
Yeah, where I wanted to go next was, what's it been like running an expanded team? And do you have the mental bandwidth? Are you having has it been counterintuitively easier with a larger team, or do you feel like you've got more on your hands at this point?
Yeah, I mean, people always ask me. I wrote another essay more recently. No meetings, no deadlines, no full-time employees, that people were very interested in, especially workers, people who work at companies, but also, a lot of founders, CEOs were like, how does it, like, what is this not going to scale, right? That was sort of common critique. You're like 25 people, like, how do you scale this? And the truth is, like, we figure it out, right? Like, I don't know what the problems are until they happen. And so we went from 25 to effectively we started trialing like 25 people in a month. So we went from 25 people in Slack, et cetera, to like 50 people. And, sort of, I didn't know if it was going to work or not. I was like, there's only one way to find out. Let's find out sooner rather than later, right? And we can make changes super, super quickly on the fly to our processes and everything like that. And it's honestly been super easy and super manageable. Like there's a Notion, like it's a Kanban board of like all the people on trial, people put in their feedback. Like it's sort of surprising. I mean, the beauty of software is that it allows you to scale your time. Instead of hiring humans, you hire software. But yeah, I think this totally works. It sort of far exceeded my expectations in terms of like how far we can push this working model. Like I actually think I'm much more convinced that this is like a really good path forward for us. It also means we can hire more people, right? Like I want to hire as many people as want to work on Gumroad. Like a lot of people want to work at these kinds of companies. There are not that many companies that work this way. And so, the sort of, I think the model allows us to sort of grow faster. We're still profitable. I'm trying really hard to make us not profitable anymore. It's a real challenge. When you're hiring people at 20 hours a week, it sort of just takes more people. And again, recruiting is the bottleneck. So I literally like can't even hire fast enough to like cut into our burn rate. But I'm trying. But no, I've been super impressed, and I think the team has sort of shown how awesome they are in terms of like their abilities to work in this way and like deal with all the change. But I do think just sort of the way that we work makes it easier. It's not as painful when someone says, "Hey, I'm not going to work at Gumroad anymore," right? Like that was a big deal when you're like, you have a lot of stuff sort of bundled and your identity kind of tied up with where you're working. Where Gumroad, I think people care, but it's not the same level of like, this is, I don't wear like a Gumroad shirt every day like I used to, sort of thing, right? So,
yeah. I have a few comments in response to that. First of all, we brought on, after the fundraise, Kyle Prinsloo, who's our head of marketing. He lives in South Africa. He and I have had a number of synchronous calls, but mostly async stuff. And Alex Garcia, who I don't know where he's located, but today was the first time we were all synchronously together at once. We jumped into a Twitter Spaces, and it was like, we just realized this is the first time we've all been talking to each other at the same time, which is kind of cool.
When we bring people on, it kind of blows their mind, right? Because I'm super public about everything. I tweet about all this stuff. I write about all this stuff. And then I do a call. Like the only time that I actually talk to anyone in a synchronous way is I do a 15-minute phone call with every new candidate. And I just kind of run them through what the trial period looks like and the logistical details and all these sorts of things. And truthfully, that could all be a Notion doc. It just isn't, because like, I believe it's good to have some brief sort of personal thing. But it blows their mind because they join GitHub, Slack, and Notion. And then they get to work, and it's like everything is, it's using like a self-serve product, right? It's like going from like Braintree to Stripe. It's like you work at a company, you get added to these 3 or 4 services, and then you can see, to your point, you can see everything. Like you can see what's getting worked on the product, the marketing. And my whole point is that like, you should never have to go through another human being. Like, you work at a company, you often have to kind of go through somebody to get to something or to see something. And I just don't believe that the best companies work that way. Like, I think the best companies are the ones that are like, you join the company and it doesn't matter where you are. Like you effectively have the same point of view as I do as CEO of the company. And I think that, finances, like, I think that's just really, really important, because that's what I want to train. Like, I love working with people who are self-motivated, autonomous, and the way you make them self-motivated and autonomous is you give them everything that they would ever possibly need. And the sort of simple way of doing that is by just giving them everything. Like, you don't have to pick, right? Just give them everything. There's basically no secrets at Gumroad. I can't really think of any, to be honest. Like, maybe some passwords that like I only have access to, or our Wells Fargo bank account or something like that. But it's incredibly minimal. The other thing that blows people's minds is like when they realize like this is all that Gumroad is, right? Like, I think a lot of people and creators often, I think, run into this where they're like, there must be more. Like, it's a company, you have payroll, you have this and that, like taxes, and like, just like people imagine that running a business is like some crazy thing. And when I tell them, like, literally, we have a repo in GitHub. We push that to a domain, gumroad.com. And then we have a Stripe account that powers it. And so that's how we make money. And then that's it. I mean, that's all our offering is effectively like, that website, some apps, right? But that's one thing I really enjoy about Gumroad is I hope that it makes people think like this is more possible for them than they may have thought, previously. Because I remember as a kid, I like would think that like a startup was like, supercomputers, like floor to ceiling on the walls. Like, I don't know what hacker, kind of the hacker movie thing, right? Where it's like, no, it's just like, me on my laptop, like, pushing code. Like, it's very, very sort of accessible.
Yeah. Let me add a layer to this. And a cultural layer. Not only do you provide employees autonomy internally, but freedom externally. And what I'm seeing and experiencing myself and feeling is complete freedom to pursue other projects. I've got a course in Maven that I'm building. I'm launching a couple of Gumroad products myself. And it's just a tremendously free cultural feeling at the company. And I think that's hugely attractive to me, and I'm sure many others.
Yeah, I mean, the word monopoly gets thrown around a lot, right? Like, there's hearings in Congress all the time, like Amazon and the Google, Apple stuff happening. And like, I think the largest, sort of the most pervasive monopoly in existence today is the monopoly that every employer has over their employees. Or effectively, you have a monopoly over their time, their focus. I think 2020 was a big deal for that, right? Because when you have an office, like, you only have one body. So you're physically, literally, they have a monopoly on like your body, right? You are physically in their space. And I just abhor that. Like, Gumroad, obviously, like a big reason that we ship what we ship is because we believe more people should be independent professionals and be able to sort of choose a lifestyle that, they may more align with more. It's why we run the company in this similar way, et cetera. But I really think that there's sort of this idea of like full-time employment, which is effectively an employer saying, a monopoly on your time, right? Like, that idea, I suspect, is going to feel very anachronistic. Like, it's not gonna, I don't think it's gonna last, just like a lot of the other ideas around, the sort of industrial age and factories and working in an office and 9 to 5 and a lot of these things. I think we'll have to get rethought as we enter this kind of new information era or knowledge work, et cetera.
Yeah, totally agree. I think a lot of our listeners are going to want some excitement around what is actually coming in the product roadmap. Yeah, and so let's just dive in and get practical and concrete about what those things are. Maybe starting with, like, what is the most foundational touchstone release that we anticipate in 2021 and then early 2022?
Yeah. Oh man, there's a lot. I'll pick two things that I'm really excited about. And we're still trying to figure out like what this looks like implementation wise. The one, supporting online courses better, like making courses and probably podcasts and newsletters and other products native to Gumroad. Right now, you create a digital product or a membership, right? And I think my guess is in the next 5-6 months or so, like, you'll come to Gumroad and you'll say, hey, I'm a podcaster, I have a podcast, right? I think it's going to be a much more intuitive experience for the creators, but it's also going to be far superior for buyers because you don't have to look at a list of files if you're consuming a podcast. It's going to look like a podcast, or it's going to look like a newsletter, it's going to look like a paid community, or it's going to look like a digital product, set of downloads, or, these sorts of things. And then that kind of dovetails with like the next thing that I'm really interested in, which is customization. Like, I think a big focus for us will be, Gumroad has been simple and clean, but over time, as people scale, they want more customization. They want to be able to do more things. And so we're going to try to figure out the best way to, keep the simplicity, make it super intuitive, but allow for more customization over time. And so you'll start to see hints of that with the new product description editor and post editor, where you'll start to be able to do more and more dynamic things within that. And you can basically imagine, like in my head, you can basically imagine that like that sort of part of the product page, right? Which is sort of a box, like a, of text that's part of a larger product page with a buy button and the cover and all these things. Like imagine if that just eats up the rest of the page, and that is basically goes full screen. Yep. And the stuff that you can do within that, which by the way includes adding a cover or adding a buy button or adding columns, that is now your product page, and you can now basically do whatever you want in it. And so that, sort of playing with some of these ideas, we're still sort of prototyping internally. I suspect creators will really be excited by some of those things.
Yeah, those are going to be huge. What has been a recent release that, even if it's super small or simple, as you say, that you're particularly proud of, that the team solved?
Yeah. Well, a really small change that just went out today is we used to have this like generic flash message, right? You hit save, it would say save, changes saved. If you had an error, it'd say, hey, you have an error, whatever. But they all look the same. Now we have different states. So now if it's successful, it's like success, nice and green. If it's an error, it's red, etc. Like just small things like that. Like one thing I love about just like having a larger team is like we can start to pick up a lot of these micro wins that really add up over time and make the experience like feel really, really, really polished and supreme. We're migrating from Flight to React, which will sort of make the whole creator experience a single page app over time. We just launched a new vertical navigation for creators. So when you log in, now the navigation is on the left, which is going to be awesome because as we do more stuff around profile customization, like it was just tough to like, everything was very squeezed into it.
I saw it on Slack, by the way, and it looks really good. It's like, very modern.
We'll probably get dark mode. Gumroad's just honestly like, it's just going to feel like a 2021 product. Like I think we've sort of, we've had an interesting path. It meant that for a couple of years, we weren't maybe shipping as fast as we should have been able to. Now we have the funding, we can hire sort of more aggressively. So, a lot of it is playing catch up. And then, kind of once we're done playing catch up, I think people will start to see like just a rate of shipment that like, I think will surprise a lot of people in a positive direction.
Yeah. Any more comments on product, by the way? And happy to stay right here, focused here, if you have more sort of thoughts on product.
One more on product, right? Which is we have this strategy at Gumroad internally where we call them North Stars. And I've talked about this a little bit publicly, but effectively we're going through every single page on Gumroad: product edit, profile edit, products dashboard, analytics, settings, like every page on Gumroad. Luckily Gumroad's simple. So there's like, less than 10 major pages on Gumroad. And we're literally like, what if, let's not think about how do we make this slightly better, but like what is the North Star? What is like the 10-year, 5-year, 3-year vision for this page? What does discount codes look like in an ideal world if we could just have, as many engineers as we wanted? And we're designing all of those things in Figma. And then, we're basically, I think we're almost done. So in a month or so, we'll have literally just diffs, right? We'll see, this is Gumroad today. This is Gumroad discount codes today. This is Gumroad discount codes North Star. And then it's going to just create a really easy way to visualize like basically where we're going, what do we need to ship? And then the engineers will kind of, I think, take those things, break them up into small tasks and ship them incrementally. So you're not going to have to wait like 3 years to get everything all at once. It's going to come in chunks. But I think that's going to be really nice because we're really, for the first time, able to think about like, what does the long term of Gumroad look like? Which looks a lot more like, Shopify or Webflow or Notion or some of these other tools we're pretty heavily inspired by.
But not necessarily open source completely.
Maybe. We'll see. We have some ideas on how to open source. I do believe really strongly that open source is the future of Gumroad in some capacity for a couple of reasons. One is the transparency, right? Like the sort of that we've always embraced. I think we've open sourced our culture. We want to open source everything, and code is a fundamental sort of primitive of the company. The other really important reason is because I think the way that we work would be so much better if it was open source. Like the way that we hire, the way that we recruit, the way we do trial periods and challenges, like it would just simplify things. And, I'm often thinking about how do I scale the recruiting function 10x, because that's the bottleneck here. I think open source is a really great solution to that. And then lastly, I think, I've been heavily inspired by what's been happening in crypto. And crypto is all about composability, open source, this sort of, and you don't really compete because everything's open source and like inherently you're not competing because it's sort of your code is more proprietary than somebody else's code, but actually that like people just kind of agree that, you were first, so therefore you deserve to be the one that we use for this. And so I'm sort of pretty inspired by that, where I think we could totally open source Gumroad and people will still choose to use Gumroad and choose to give us money effectively because, we built something valuable and I just want to, be honest with myself, like what value does Gumroad provide? And I think the best way to be honest about that is to effectively give everything away for free and then see what people choose to pay us.
Yeah, this is a great segue. And I want to push you further on this. You've talked about like, what if you scaled yourself down? Like, what if you replaced yourself in essence and just combining that with crypto? It's like, what if you turn into the Vitalik of Gumroad and you're just like running a foundation and there's a whole community around it and we're scaling up our marketing and Gumroad is trying to like win by community, not necessarily like a proprietary product, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I think Gumroad long-term wins, like the most powerful network effect is choice, right? People choose, like people have coalesced around a certain idea or domain or name or person, for a certain thing. And that has nothing to do with feature set or technology, right? It's the thing that people want to win, which ends up winning. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have the cash flow to, this is like what you see with Tesla. People wanted Tesla to win, so they bought stock and the stock went up. And then all of a sudden, Elon actually had the capital to go do some of the things that he wanted to do. And it kind of ended up working to quite a large degree. So yeah, definitely like kind of the why, I've thought about replacing myself as CEO, but like why replace myself with another human being, right? Like what, like, can I just delete myself over time? Like, can I just give the keys to 1 million different people or 100 different people? Or like, what does that look like? And I think these are a lot of the conversations that are happening in startups, right? Because we sort of all abhor centralization, right? Like we all like sort of being powerful, but I think it gets to a point where like, I don't think anyone wants to make these calls. I don't think anyone wants to be the CEO of Twitter or Facebook in that way and have to do that. And so I think there's sort of problems that are relatively new problems, right? Like no one was talking about these problems 5-10 years ago. But I think DAOs and crypto and open source and some of the stuff that we'll experiment with, will I think lead to whatever that new world kind of looks like.
Yeah. Any sort of concerns that you have as we move into this next chapter, the second half of 2021? Or maybe a more positive way of asking that question is like, other than what we've talked about right now, what are major priorities? I know marketing is one of them, and how do we win there? And any other topics you want to cover before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think community, figuring out like how do we really get a good sense of who uses Gumroad? How can we refine our sort of vision for who? And, I think that's sort of a requirement for being able to build community because people need more commonality. And I think Gumroad is great because it's such a diverse set of creators, but, I think it would be helpful to kind of get more specific. So, that's kind of a big thing that I'm thinking about. I think the thing that sort of concerns me is like, is it too late, right? Like we took a break for a while. We're now ramping up a lot. It's intensely fierce competition right now. Stripe is doing like an insane amount of stuff. We have so many cool things, and it just takes time to build, and we're fine, right? We're profitable. We're growing, all of these sorts of things. But I think if we want to really show the world that like this way of working is interesting, I think we really do need to sort of 10x the business, which I think is possible, but is sort of TBD. And to your point around marketing, like we can build the best product. I'm sort of confident that we'll get there because we have a phenomenal team and phenomenal designers and engineers. We also have phenomenal marketers now, finally. So, I'm hopeful that we can kind of get there. And I don't see that we don't. Maybe I'm just too confident, but it seems like we'll get there eventually. But I do think, yeah, like Stripe is like, the sort of existential question for the creator economy is like, do platforms like Patreon need to exist, or will Twitter and Stripe effectively subsume them? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Obviously, I don't think, for a variety of reasons, I don't think Patreon's going to go away or anything like that. But I do think that sort of, as a CEO of a company, you need to be thinking about sort of the macro and what these sort of these larger companies that can throw around hundreds of engineers if they wish will kind of do to you, right?
Yeah.
If they decide what you're working on is important.
Which makes it all the more important to have a tight, intimate relationship with your customers and so forth, and really serve them and tighten that loop. My last question for you is, irrespective of Gumroad, your personal life, not your actual personal life, but like your outside interests. I know you think of it as, in terms of, I've heard you talk about this in the past, you've like 3 or 5 buckets to include Gumroad as one of them, the rolling fund, et cetera, et cetera. So are you thinking about your buckets and where are you going there?
Yeah. So I have three buckets. It's founder, funder, creator is how I think about it. So founder, Gumroad, funder, my rolling fund, and creator is my book with Penguin that comes out in October and my course on Gumroad and things like that. Yeah, I think that's sort of a healthy balance. Gumroad is my number one priority. It's the vast majority of my net worth. And it's, I like building stuff. Like that's sort of my core passion. It's why I like funding startups, is because I can see the really early stages of building stuff. I also like writing and producing, making stuff. Like, obviously I started a creator economy company. Like I believe in sort of the creative process. But yeah, Gumroad is definitely the major focus. And it sort of has become a lot more interesting recently because of the crowdfund, because of the sort of democratization of VC, because of the new way that we work. And I actually have some stuff to show you too, Justin, that I think you may be interested in, that I've been toying with within the Gumroad. It's within the Gumroad umbrella, but it's a little out there.
I can tell you're having fun. It seems like
I'm having fun. I think, that's super important, right? Like, because otherwise you burn out, you run out of energy. And creators know this, right? Like, you need to figure out how to make it fun and how to make it rewarding and have a feedback loop that keeps you going. And Gumroad, to be honest, for me, it didn't have that for a while. But now with some of these interesting ideas that are almost like meta, it's not about the product itself, but it's kind of about the process and the company and the org and the culture that lead to the product.
The factory is the product.
Exactly. The factory. Exactly. Elon Musk said this, right? I think our factory is a product, which is exactly right. Like, I think ultimately you want to build a machine that can produce on an ongoing basis. And that's what leverage is you can, I can hire somebody once and they can write code infinite, right? Kind of thing. So, trying to find more ways to do that is very, very exciting.
Cool. Any parting thoughts?
If you're an engineer or designer looking to work at Gumroad 20 hours a week or so, let me know. That's definitely the sort of the bottleneck. Otherwise, just stay tuned. And as you mentioned, like, if you're a creator on Gumroad and you have feedback, like, my email is my first name, Sahil@gumroad.com. It's not hard to get a hold of me, DM me on Twitter. I really do listen to all the feedback and sometimes personally fix the bugs. Most of the time, the bugs are my fault anyway. So yeah, I'm here to.
I saw on Slack the other day that there was somebody who was dissatisfied with a particular feature or implementation, and you said, "I'll just go there and apologize." I thought that was a great response.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and we one of the nature, we're shipping faster, right? And part of that is we will probably break things more often than we weren't breaking things before. Hopefully, the good stuff far outweighs the bad, but every creator has a different experience, and there may be creators who like only experience the bad parts. But yeah, I think hopefully everyone understands that, like, we're trying, we have good intentions, and we're always willing to learn and listen, and yeah, we try to be available. So,
well, thanks for joining us today, Sahil. We'll be doing these on a regular basis, sort of periodically, around monthly. But thanks for being here.
You're welcome.